Marcus Aurelius had everything. Absolute power, infinite wealth, the world's wisdom. Yet woke each morning feeling utterly purposeless. 2,000 years later, Carl Jung discovered why the most successful people feel the most empty. They're living as the wrong archetype. Tonight, you'll learn the 7 archetypal forces that determine human purpose and why Jung found Marcus had cracked the code centuries before modern psychology existed. This isn't about finding your passion. It's about recognizing which crown already belongs to you. Picture this. The Emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, sits alone in his tent on the Danube frontier. Outside, his legions celebrate another victory. Inside, he writes by candlelight, trying to solve a mystery that gnaws at his soul. Why does absolute power feel absolutely meaningless? 2,000 years later, Carl Jung would decode what Marcus discovered that night. After decades of clinical work, Jung revealed that over 1/3 of his patients suffered from no mental illness. They suffered from archetypal abandonment, from living as strangers to their own souls. The secret Marcus found, the one Jung proved, is this. Human beings are governed by 7 primordial patterns, archetypes that determine not just who you are, but why you exist. The healer, the builder, the artist, the king, the knight, the vizier, the goldsmith. One of these is your true nature, and every moment you spend pretending otherwise is a moment you spend dying. What you're about to discover isn't philosophy or psychology, it's alchemy, the transformation of purposeless lead into sovereign gold. And it begins with a simple question. Which archetype owns your soul? The answer changes everything. In the winter of 170 AD, as plague devoured Rome's population, Marcus Aurelius made a confession that would haunt history. I wake to darkness, though I rule the light. The most powerful man on earth, philosopher king, supreme commander, felt something worse than death creeping through his bones. He felt pointless. This is what Jung would later call successful emptiness. Marcus commanded legions, held absolute power, possessed infinite wealth. Yet each morning he forced himself from bed like a slave, not a sovereign. What Marcus discovered in those plague years wasn't just personal. It was archetypal. He'd been performing Marcus the Emperor instead of embodying his true nature. Purpose isn't about what you do. It's about aligning what you do with what you are. Jung's breakthrough came from an undeniable pattern. Patient after patient arrived with identical symptoms: successful lives, empty souls. A wealthy banker who fantasized about teaching, a doctor healing bodies while his spirit withered. An artist who traded her craft for stability and felt suffocated. Over 1/3 suffered not from neurosis, Jung wrote, but from the senselessness of their lives. They were archetypally displaced, living as imposters in their own existence. Here's the dark truth. These patients weren't just unhappy, they were dying faster. The banker developed heart disease. The doctor became addicted. The artist tried to end his life. When you betray your archetype, your body rebels through depression, anxiety, addiction, disease. The cure wasn't therapy. It was archetypal realignment. Stripping false identities until only truth remained. Some abandoned decades of success. Others embraced aspects they'd feared. All discovered, alignment doesn't make life easier, it makes life real. When life becomes real, purpose stops being a question. The night Marcus decoded the patterns, Greek philosophy literally rearranged itself into a map of human purpose. He saw 7 primordial blueprints, each with sovereignty and shadow. The healer, born to mend what's broken. We've turned them into pill dispensers, and they suffer from what they're meant to cure. The builder, architects of reality. We've reduced them to code monkeys building their own prisons. The artist, channels of divine imagination. We've convinced them art doesn't pay, so they prostitute vision for corporate logos. The king, leading through service. We've corrupted them into tyrants, confusing power with purpose. The knight, defenders of sacred values. We've enslaved them to corrupt systems where honor dies with every unjust order. The vizier, teachers of truth. We've made them academic prostitutes selling wisdom for tenure. The goldsmith, masters of value exchange. They have the most dangerous duality, facilitating human flourishing or becoming civilization's cancer. Marcus saw Rome's goldsmiths worshipping money itself. Jung watched the same corruption destroy Zurich's souls. The revelation, you don't choose your archetype, it chooses you. Fighting it is like changing blood type. Marcus was rare, king, knight, and vizier unified. This wasn't ego, it was recognition. Which force flows through your veins demanding expression? But here's what nobody tells you about discovering your archetype. It's not euphoric, it's terrifying. When Marcus recognized his true nature, he didn't feel liberated. He felt the weight of archetypal sacrifice. If you're a builder playing goldsmith for money, alignment means walking away from wealth. If you're an artist hiding as a corporate knight, it means exposing your vulnerable creative soul. Jung called this the archetypal death, killing who you've pretended to be so who you are can live. Marcus faced this when his king nature demanded he stay in Rome during plague, while every instinct screamed flee. His knight aspect required leading troops personally. His vizier calling forced him to write philosophy, while critics mocked an emperor, wasting time with words. Here's the reframe. Your life's persistent frustrations aren't random. They're your archetype trying to break free. That corporate rage, your artist suffocating. That emptiness despite wealth, your healer dying to serve. The price of purpose is the death of pretense. Here's the paradox that shatters everything. Marcus Aurelius discovered that finding your archetype isn't the end. It's the beginning of a cosmic joke. The moment you align with your true nature, you realize something terrifying. You're not just a healer, builder, or king. You're all 7 archetypes, but society's conditioning has buried 6 of them alive. Jung hid this in his private notes. The individuated man contains all archetypal potentials. Marcus lived this truth, king, knight, and vizier simultaneously. Not because he was special, but because he stopped choosing. The twist? Your dominant archetype is just your entry point into wholeness. The goldsmith who embraces his shadow becomes a healer. The artist who faces her fear becomes a warrior. You're not finding your purpose, you're excavating your pantheon. So here you stand at the threshold, fallen king. 7 archetypes swirl within you, 1 demanding recognition, 6 awaiting resurrection. Marcus knew, Jung proved. Now you must choose. Remain fractured, living someone else's life, or undergo the archetypal death that births psychological sovereignty. The crown of purpose awaits. But first, you must die. Your transformation begins now. Remember that question haunting Marcus in his plague-surrounded tent? Why does absolute power feel absolutely meaningless? Now you know. He was wearing crowns that didn't fit his soul's architecture. The emperor discovered what would take Jung 2 millennia to scientifically prove. Purposelessness isn't a lack of achievement or direction. It's archetypal betrayal. Every moment of existential anxiety, every morning you wake up dreading your successful life, every achievement that feels hollow, these aren't symptoms of failure. They're symptoms of living as the wrong archetype. Jung's patients weren't mentally ill. They were spiritually miscast. The banker belonged in a classroom. The doctor was meant to be a mystic. The artist had abandoned her throne. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Marcus didn't just identify his archetypes, he integrated them. The king served during plague. The knight defended borders. The vizier wrote eternal wisdom. He discovered that purpose isn't singular, it's symphonic. You're not meant to be one note, but an entire orchestra, with one instrument leading while others support. The anxiety of life that plagued Marcus, that Jung diagnosed in thousands, that probably brought you to this video, it's not a curse. It's your soul's compass pointing toward archetypal truth. So how do you begin this archetypal awakening? Marcus left the formula Jung would later codify. First, identify which of the 7 archetypes makes you feel most alive. Not successful, not approved of, but alive. What brings inexplicable joy? When do you lose track of time? Where does your soul feel sovereign? That's your dominant archetype screaming for recognition. Second, serve others through this archetypal gift immediately. Today, the healer tends wounds, the builder creates solutions, the artist births beauty, the king strengthens community, the knight defends the defenseless, the vizier teaches truth, the goldsmith facilitates fair exchange. Not tomorrow, now. Third, maintain what Marcus called the divine connection, staying open to the cosmic source flowing through your archetype. This isn't mystical abstraction. It's practical alignment with forces larger than ego. Stop asking, what's my purpose? Start asking, which archetype am I betraying? The answer will revolutionize everything. Your sovereignty awaits your courage. The plague has lifted from Rome, but not from your soul. Not yet. Marcus Aurelius sits in his tent, no longer questioning, but knowing. Jung closes his case files, having mapped the territory between meaninglessness and immortality. And you, fallen king, you stand at the threshold between anxiety and archetype. Which crown will you claim?